Hello there. In this video, I'm going to talk about the Coxwell Streetcar, one of Toronto's shorter streetcar lines and to the general public a relatively unknown one. But at the same time, to those within the transportation fan community, is a sort of holy grail streetcar line, not just because of how it ended, but also because of how close it came to being restored. So let's get into the video. The origins of the Coxwell Streetcar begin at the turn of the century. At this time, Coxwell Avenue was a small dirt road located east of Toronto and west of the village of East Toronto. This would change, however, when a short stretch of track was built along Coxwell Avenue to connect the two branches of Gerrard Street, Lower Gerrard and Upper Gerrard. This jog in the road was a result of several ravines left behind by the old Lake Iroquois shoreline and the developments of the village of Little Norway and the village of East Toronto. When the city of Toronto annexed these lands, they sought to link these new residential lands and created Upper Gerrard, as Eastwood Road, which connects to Lower Gerrard, traversed uneven topography and was thus deemed unsuitable for streetcar use. When the Toronto Civic Railway created its Gerrard streetcar line, it would briefly jog along Coxwell Avenue to connect between the two Gerrards. When the Toronto Civic Railway created its Danforth Streetcar, they also constructed a single-track line along Coxwell Avenue between Gerrard Street and Danforth Avenue to allow Gerrard streetcars to access the Danforth Car House and vacate the old facility on Gerrard Street and Morton Road. The story of the Coxwell Streetcar itself would begin when the Toronto Transportation Commission took over streetcar operations from the Toronto Civic Railway and the Toronto Railway Company in 1921. The TTC at this time would set about integrating the TCR and TRC networks together, and on Coxwell Avenue this would take the form of new track construction between Queen Street and Gerrard Street. The single-track line between Gerrard Street and Danforth Avenue, which was built by the TCR, would also be double-tracked, thus creating a single line from Queen Street to Danforth Avenue. On October 1st, 1921, the Gerrard streetcar route was realigned to run from Main Street to a crossover at Queen Street via Gerrard and Coxwell Avenue. The route would be subsequently renamed to Gerrard and Main. The next day, October 2nd, the Coxwell Streetcar would come into existence, operating from Danforth Avenue to Queen Street. On July 1st, 1923, service on the Gerrard Main was abolished and its route realigned into downtown Toronto. That same day, the Sunday, holiday, and overnight services on the Coxwell Streetcar would be extended to the new Bingham Loop on Kingston Road. On August 2nd, 1937, evening service and weekend services along this route would then be merged with the newly created Kingston Road streetcar. This service would be renamed as Kingston Road Coxwell on February 2nd, 1948. Some Coxwell cars would also operate to Woodbine Loop at the intersection of Woodbine and Queen Street. As well, a Saturday Tripper car was also present, although both of these services would be abolished on November 27, 1965. Up until 1940, the Coxwell Streetcar used double-ended cars and would thus terminate at crossovers instead of loops. This would change, however, with the construction of a loop at Queen Street. From here on, the Coxwell Streetcar would use single-ended cars and utilize loops at Danforth Avenue and Queen Street. This change was done as a means to speed up turnaround service. Coxwell Loop, the one on Queen Street, is interesting in that while the intersection of Queen Street and Coxwell Avenue is your standard three-way T intersection, cars which use the loop itself can only access Coxwell Avenue. Even though the loop turns onto Queen Street, there is no actual access from the loop onto Queen Street. By the 1940s, Coxwell streetcars operated between Danforth Loop and Coxwell Loop on weekdays. Evening, nights, and weekend services as part of the Kingston Road Coxwell Streetcar would operate to Birchmount Loop in Scarborough. This service, however, would be cut back to Bingham Loop at Victoria Park Avenue on July 1st, 1954 as part of the TTC's new Fare Zone system. A bus terminal would be built at Bingham Loop to allow passengers to transfer between streetcars from downtown to buses into Scarborough. Service on the Coxwell Streetcar would come to an end with the opening of the Bloor-Danforth Subway line. At the time, the TTC did not consider retaining the streetcar line even though tracks along the route still existed. The tracks did not connect to the subway station, however, and the TTC did not intend on making such a connection. As well, by this time the TTC was pushing its streetcar abandonment policy and simply no longer wished to operate the route, and so, on February 28, 1966, the Coxwell Streetcar was formally abolished, ending 45 years of streetcar service on Coxwell Avenue. While the streetcar was now gone, the tracks remained to allow Carlton streetcars access to the Danforth car house. As well, some Carlton streetcars would still short-turn onto Coxwell Avenue to access Danforth Loop. On June 15, 1967, however, these tracks between Upper Gerrard and Danforth Avenue were abandoned and paved over. With this, Carlton streetcars would now have to run along Danforth Avenue itself from Main Street to access the car house. The loop at Queen Street and Coxwell Avenue had been deactivated back in 1966, but was now reactivated to allow Carlton streetcars the ability to short turn here now that the Danforth loop was gone. When the Bloor-Danforth Subway was extended east to Warden Station in 1968, the Danforth car house was converted into a bus garage. Alongside this, the Danforth shuttle was abolished. Because of this, Carlton streetcars would be moved to the Russell car house, and as such, the remaining stretch of track between Gerrard Street and Queen Street along Coxwell Avenue became the main yard access for the Carlton streetcars. In 1996, the TTC commissioned a report looking at what bus routes could be cheaply converted back into streetcar routes. Coxwell came out on top, as only 1 kilometer of new track would need to be built, alongside the construction of a streetcar loop at Coxwell Station. The TTC, however, did not follow through on this report though, as it was noted the current Coxwell bus's ridership was simply too low to justify a streetcar service. As well, it was noted that Coxwell Avenue was too narrow for a private right-of-way to be built, and the TTC did not wish to construct any more mixed-traffic streetcar lines. If a new line was to be built, it must be on its own right-of-way. Finally, the TTC also noted that the current bus terminal at Coxwell Station is simply unfit for streetcar use, and so a new loop with a connection to the subway would need to be built, thus adding to the expense, even as low as it may be. All that said though, the TTC could not deny the feasibility of the idea and the general ease at which it could have been accomplished. Today, tracks still remain on Coxwell Avenue between Gerrard Street and Queen Street to allow Carlton streetcars access to the Russell car house. As well, some Carlton streetcars will short turn at Coxwell Loop, so it is not at all uncommon to see streetcars on Coxwell Avenue today. The loss of the Coxwell streetcar is one of those that make you ask why. Unlike other lines which have some viable excuse for their abolishment, the Coxwell streetcar really doesn't to me. To me, the Coxwell streetcar was a victim of the streetcar abandonment policy and the TTC's desire to rid itself of its streetcar network back in the 60s. Considering that tracks along Coxwell still existed in their entirety when the Bloor-Danforth Subway opened, could the connection of the streetcar to the subway been all that great an expense? The abolishment of the Coxwell streetcar is a bit of a head-scratcher, and the question really should be asked, did it even need to happen? This is the question the TTC pretty much asked themselves in 1996 with the report that cited Coxwell as a possible streetcar route. Now, it is true, the current Coxwell bus has ridership that simply doesn't justify a streetcar, and a modern streetcar would be just that, a lightly used route running between Coxwell Station and Queen Street. Its utility strictly local in nature, unless of course you extend the line into downtown Toronto via Queen Street. There is of course also the consideration that the TTC simply no longer wishes to create any more mixed traffic streetcar lines, and so any new streetcar construction would have to be in its own right of way. That said, however, given the relative ease and low cost of re-establishing service on Coxwell Avenue, perhaps there is still potential to the idea, a potential even the TTC itself saw. Perhaps it is not too far-fetched an idea that we may one day see the Coxwell streetcar again. But all that said, I'll end the video here. Thank you for watching this video, and if you want to see more like it, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, because I have more like it on the channel, and I have more like it on the way in the future. If there's anything you want to say about the Coxwell Streetcar, don't be afraid to do so down in the comments below. And with that, I'll see you in the next video.